Hi guys, welcome back to Scott Family Homestead. If you are new here, I am Christine. My husband Ryan and I are homesteading in northern Wisconsin. We're a homestead turned small farm. Today we're going to talk about meat birds. I'm going to talk about two different ways that we're going about raising meat for our family and for our customers. The first being the traditional Cornish cross chicken, and then we're also going to talk a little bit about dual purpose chickens and what our plans are with that for the future and what we've learned by doing those in the past. We've been raising chickens for about 11 or 12 years. When we first kind of dipped our toes into homesteading, we started with meat birds. Not what most people usually start with, but we started with that before we even got our laying hens. We were on a small city lot and we wanted to try to grow some of our own food. We started with jumbo Cornish cross. They grew really well for us the first time. My husband promised he would do all of the butchering and I wouldn't have to do a thing. We did not have a whole lot of money. He rigged up a small water heater, just an old one that we had on hand that he was going to use to scald the chickens so we could pluck them. So he could pluck them. Things went south pretty quickly with that. Our setup worked okay, but he was very overwhelmed with it on his own. I remember him coming into the kitchen and saying, "You gotta help me, you gotta help me." I said, "You promised? No, I'm not doing anything with these chickens." And he said, "We don't have a choice." And so I came out and I plucked the chickens for him, and we did finally get through that batch of 25, and it didn't deter us. We ended up getting some laying hens after that, and we've been raising meat birds every year ever since. But it was definitely an adventure starting out. We read all of the things online, more so in books because there wasn't a lot of resources online at the time. We have slowly learned over time the best way to butcher chickens, the best way to grow them, or at least the way we prefer to grow them. We do our Cornish cross in chicken tractors. I have plans for those chicken tractors both on my YouTube channel and also on my blog, and we have decided to start growing for more people. Last year was our first year of butchering a lot for other people. We grew, I want to say, about 120 chickens, and we butchered them ourselves. We sold them to family at $4 a pound. That's kind of the going rate around here. And we made enough money to pay for our own chickens for our family. We kept about 40 to 50 for ourselves. It was covered by the costs of butchering everybody else's chickens, and it really worked out pretty good. And so we decided, hey, next year, let's do more. Let's double. So we did 240 chickens this year. I had it all planned out, and we decided that we could not butcher that many on our own. Butchering days were taking entire days, several days in order to get through an entire batch of 50 the way we were growing them. So we decided to go with a butcher that we've used in the past before that we really like. We ordered our chickens in batches of 60. Did 4 batches throughout the summer. We butchered our chickens when they were 8 weeks old, and we were ordering our chickens about every 6 weeks. They kind of overlapped as far as how that went. Some were brooding while the rest of them were finishing. We'd bring a batch to the butcher, and then we'd bring our young ones out of the brooder and put them into the tractors. And we had a pretty good system going, except we had a few problems. Number one being profit. As soon as we brought in a butcher and started paying the fees for that, we started to lose money quickly. We didn't lose money on our meat birds this year, but we did end up having to pay for our own at about, from the chickens that we kept and how many pounds that we kept, we paid about $3 a pound for what was left over for us. So it did contribute to the cost of our own chickens. However, we didn't turn a profit, and if you are farming, you know that that's no good. To raise 240 chickens is a lot of work. We started in April and went all the way into October and took a significant amount of resources to grow these Cornish cross, only for us to get tiny little benefit from it. Whereas if we just raised our own chickens, we could do 50 for ourselves. We could butcher that amount by ourselves. We would save a ton of money. For sure, get that number under $3 a pound. So today we're discussing what can we do different in order to turn more profit on our meat birds without cutting out the butcher, because we had some loss. We kept about 40 chickens for ourselves. Some of those were roosters from our laying flock. And then we did sell close to 200 chickens this year. We are totally sold out, and we've got people asking for them every week. We've got more people asking for chickens. And so the demand is there, but we have to be able to get some sort of profit or it's not worth it to us. Let's discuss a few of the things that we did this year and then how we're going to change it going into next year to make things work out a little bit better. One of the things that we did this year that was a problem is that we never raised our prices. So we stayed with that $4 a pound. It is still a good competitive price for our area, but we actually did offer some chickens for even less than that. We started selling bundles of chickens because a lot of our chickens ended up on the smaller side, and we'll get into that in a little bit too. But we started selling beef and pork in the fall, and we needed to clear space of these chickens for freezer space purposes. We have a limited amount of space to put all of this pork and beef that was coming, so we started to offload some of the chicken. I ended up offering packs of 10 of these 3-pound birds. They all kind of averaged right at 3 pounds for $99. So basically less than $10 per chicken, which came out to a really good deal. Those sold like crazy. We went through a ton of chickens that way, cleared the space that we needed for our pork, but we did let those go at such a low price that it really affected our profit on that as well. Now, looking back, not a whole lot else I could have done because I needed at that moment to get that chicken out and get them to customers so that we could have that space. Now we have more freezer space and we've been able to invest into more of that after getting some of our money back, but we couldn't at the time. I will not be running a special quite that good again in the future, but it did kind of solve a problem for us, and there was a reason for why we did that. Being a new business, I know that it brought some new customers to us who are coming back for other cuts and other varieties of meat and products. So I think in the long run, it wasn't a super poor choice, but it's something that we won't be able to do sustainably in the future unless we start to earn profits somewhere else. One of our other problems this year, as I kind of touched on, is that our birds did not grow that big. Now, our most difficult batch was definitely our very first batch. I don't know if it's because the cold kind of lingered and it was more cold than we expected, or if there was just something with that batch of birds, but we did have more loss. Not specifically related to the cold, but they just were not growing great. And then we kind of started to lose them like one by one towards the end, and they weren't heavy enough to be like breaking legs or having heart attacks like you get with Cornish cross sometimes. They just didn't grow well. That first batch early in the spring that was finished kind of the end of May, I believe was our first butcher date, they just didn't do great. And so the rest of our chickens all came from that same supplier, and they did better in those mid-months. So June, July, August, they grew better. Nothing that was as big as we had hoped or expected. So we are happy with 4-pound birds. A lot of those were right around 4 pounds, give or take half a pound, 3.5, 4.5, from those 2 middle batches. But I would really like to see 5 pounds plus, and we only had a few of those in those batches. What happens when you have the bigger birds, you're paying the same price for butchering no matter what. So it spreads that cost of butchering out over more pounds of meat. And so the per pound price of your investment is so much lower. So if you're butchering smaller birds, it's so much harder to turn a profit. So we definitely want to adjust something to deal with the growth of those birds and getting them to a bigger size before we bring them to the butcher. That's a big one for us. If you are butchering on your own, one of the huge benefits to that is that you decide when you want to butcher them. So if they're not looking big enough, you just grow them for another week. And if you are on that butcher schedule, that makes it difficult because once your day comes, you got to bring your chickens in regardless of how big they are. And sometimes that means you're taking a loss on it because your chickens just didn't get as big as you were hoping, but today's the day and you got to bring them in. If you are able to butcher your birds yourself, you have a lot more flexibility in that. Another option that we offered this year was pieced out birds. So you pay extra for the packaging for that. And so we offered like 4-piece chickens, which is basically half a chicken, or 8-piece. And the butcher just cuts the whole chicken up and packages it into one package. It is a nice way to have your meat because you can thaw out a couple of those and use all 4 breasts for one meal, and then you can make fried chicken or something with the rest of it. So you get a couple meals throughout the week from the parts already being taken apart. The cost of doing that also did not pay without charging a higher price for that. And we're really trying not to pass these expenses on to our customers. We're trying to stay at that $4 a pound or lower. And that was an issue with paying for that extra packaging and that extra step, especially with the 4-piece, because you end up buying 2 bags for those, and it's not cheap at our butcher. So I don't think we would be parting them out again. When we butcher, we love to part things out, like breasts in 1 pack, like 4 or 6 for our family size, and a whole bunch of thighs in a pack. But in order for us to sell to customers, we can't part out like that. We have to do whole birds. And so I thought, okay, well, the butcher offers parts. Let's see how we like it, if that's something we want to do in the future. And I would definitely do it again if somebody specifically bought like a large batch of chickens. Say they're going to buy 20 or 30 chickens from us and they want them parted out. But we'll have to discuss the cost of the packaging with that. But it's definitely something that I could do and I could order again. But as far as trying to then sell 8-piece parts, it's a little bit more difficult. We ended up including a lot of those into our Homestead bundles. So when we were selling boxes that had pork, beef, and chicken in it, we did the parted out chickens. And again, on a bundle, we're taking a cut, like we're giving a discount on that. So it kind of went the opposite direction, and we actually made even less money on those. I think that they would have sold separately, but again, as a new business, we're trying to introduce new products, and we're trying to get all of our product lines out there so that people can try a little bit of everything. So we kind of put that investment into that this year, but we will have to do something different in the future as far as that goes in order to turn a profit. So with our Cornish cross rolling into 2025, what we've decided to do differently this year, first of all, I would love to hear your advice on this. What do you find grows the biggest, best birds? Where do you like to buy them from? And any advice you can give me as far as growing them out. And then I'm going to tell you what we plan to do, and I would love to hear from you as to if this has worked for you in the past or if I'm on the wrong track. First thing we're going to do, we're going to try sourcing from a different hatchery this year. We typically source from Sunnyside here in Wisconsin. We love them. Their customer service has been great. And since they're close to us, the shipping stress is usually fairly low. We also have a dealer close by to us, so we can kind of go through them as far as ordering. And we've got somebody looking at them when they come in and making sure they're all healthy and good to go. I'm not saying that there is anything wrong with the hatchery that we were using, but in the past we did use Meyer Hatchery and got bigger chickens in the long run. At that time we were also using a different feed that was more expensive and organic, and I don't know if it was the feed or the hatchery, so we're just going to try. We're going to try a different hatchery, see how it goes. If that doesn't seem to make a difference, we'll go back to our old faithful Sunnyside. We are ordering our turkeys, our layers, and our dual purpose from Sunnyside, and we'll see kind of where that leads. We do really like them, so I'm not knocking them at all, but we are going to try a couple different things this year, and one of it is switching back to the previous hatchery that we ordered from. While keeping price in mind, we also have had really good luck with Murray McMurray. If you have ever compared hatcheries, you'll know that McMurray kind of runs on the more expensive side. And so while they are a great option for our birds, and we have raised meat birds from them, we aren't going to switch back to them quite yet because we're really trying to focus on getting that cost down. The next thing that we've decided to do, because we do want to stick with a butcher, is we are going to try to push out our butchering schedule to 9 to 10 weeks instead of 8 weeks. I know that they can start to have health issues as you go longer, but I've been researching this and I see a lot of people are having good luck growing them just that tiny bit longer to get that extra protein put on them. We're going to give it a try and see how that works out. And we're also going to do our chickens in 2 batches this year instead of 4. This means I'm going to build 2 more chicken tractors. We're going to run 4 tractors across. We're going to do 100 chickens at a time. What that does, it makes the cost per bird, per chick, when you order them, smaller, and then it also cuts cost at the butcher. If you can bring in 100 birds at a time, the cost of butchering goes down per bird. So by doing bigger batches, we can kind of save some money with the hatchery and with the butcher, which will give us a little bit of a head start right off the bat. We will have to invest more money in the feed to get them that extra feed for 1 to 2 extra weeks, but I'm hoping that the benefit of how much more meat they put on and how we can spread that butchering cost out between those pounds will hopefully cover that cost and more. With doing just 2 batches, we can also keep them centered more towards those warmer months. So we're going to grow them starting in maybe mid-May through, I guess this would take us through the middle of September. So we're going to go through kind of the warmer months. It's going to be easier to raise them, and hopefully that helps with their survival, and it helps with what they're eating. They're not eating food just to try to stay warm. They're eating food and they're converting it into meat. So bigger batches, I think, will really pay off in that respect. We can kind of condense our season, get all the work done in about 12 weeks time, 12 to 14 weeks time, instead of staggering it throughout a large 4-month ordeal. The last thing we're going to do is up our protein a little bit. You don't want to overdo your protein when you're raising meat birds, because that's when they start to have heart attacks and they break their legs from growing too quickly. But we're going to try to do 18% pretty much all the way through, with a little bit of 20% at the very beginning. This time we did 18% at the beginning and then reduced to 16%, and I think it just was not enough. It did save us a little bit money on the feed because we weren't having it custom made. We were just using their meat bird mix. But I think in the long run, it just wasn't worth it to take that reduction in protein. We're also going to be a little bit more strict about a 12-hour on, 12-hour off feeding schedule. We were feeding them more than that. I would say we would provide them with more feed to try to get them further through. A lot of the times the kids were helping us feed the chickens, and so we would not always know exactly how much was left in there when they refilled it or what exactly they needed. So we're going to try to be a little bit more strict about 12 hours on, 12 hours off. I know a lot of people have luck with that. I know that's kind of the general recommendation, is to make sure they don't have that feed at night. Again, we were feeding them more and more through the night, also to keep their body temperature up in those cold seasons. For the very early ones and the very late ones, we went into mid-October with that last batch, and so we were feeding them more. We didn't have a lot of loss, I think, because the protein was lower and they weren't growing so fast that they were breaking legs or anything. And so I think it was okay that we were feeding them around the clock, but I'm hoping the feed conversion can be a little bit better, sticking to that 12 on, 12 off schedule. Overall, the goal is to get better feed conversion, bigger birds, and get our cost down enough that we don't have to raise the price on our customers, where we can stick to that $4 a pound. But actually make some money doing it, because raising over 200 chickens and not having any money to take home at the end of it, or at least having it cover the cost of the birds you're growing for your family, is kind of a bummer. Now, in the past, we did dual purpose birds. So not this year, but last year, and I have a whole video about this. We got a hybrid bird from Sunnyside Hatchery that is meant to be raised as dual purpose. So they can be layers or they can be meat birds, and they did have some really nice sized roosters that we got out of there. Even the hens were pretty decently sized. We did kind of an experiment knowing that they were hybrids. We didn't know exactly what would come out the other end when we tried to breed them and hatch them ourselves, and it definitely didn't go the way that we planned. We got a large variety of birds. There was a few things that went wrong. I have a video that I will link all about our dual purpose experiment, but it just in general didn't go exactly how we had hoped. My husband had some health issues and we weren't able to see it all the way through this year. We kind of had to pull the plug on it, knowing that the hybrid bird was not going to reproduce the way that we had wanted it to. So we do want to get back into dual purpose birds, because I think it's a great option. I mean, the sustainability of it, and being able to keep your own flock on hand, grow layers and meat birds, and have that completely contained on your farm. You are not worrying about availability anywhere. You're not worrying about the diseases like avian flu right now, whatever your opinion is on that. You're not bringing in new birds every year onto your farm and property from hatcheries if you can run a successful dual purpose flock. Now, you probably do want to add some new genetics to it every so often and not just keep inbreeding that same flock. But in general, what I mean is, if you had to, you could raise them on your farm without having to rely on anybody else. And there's a huge value to that. There just is. Whether you lean towards the prepper side of things or not, I see a lot of value in running your own flock like that. And so we would like to try that. And on that video where we talked about the dual purpose birds, I had a lot of good recommendations for other options to try. So we are going to go back into raising dual purpose. We run them as a separate flock, separate from our meat birds, separate from our layers. We have a tractor. It's a trailer, actually. So it's a trailer with cattle panels over it. It's tarped. And we're going to convert that into an actual movable coop. We're going to build it out, insulate it, and have that be a coop specifically for our dual purpose. And the plan is to raise Delawares this year. We've kind of narrowed it down to that. They are a nice white bird. They dress out nice. They put on a good amount of weight. They make good layers, and they are good for our cold environment up here in Wisconsin. So we are going to go ahead and order 100 of those to get started. And we're going to butcher most of the roosters for our own uses in the fall. So when they're about 20 weeks, we will sell a lot of the smaller hens as egg layers and add a couple to our own flock. And then all of the bigger hens and 1 or 2 roosters we will keep to be our breeding stock for next year's dual purpose birds, and try to keep this going where we are hatching out our own. One of the things that we learned is that you can't have other roosters in with them like for weeks if you're gonna hatch out eggs and want a consistent product. That can cause a big issue, apparently. And so we want to run these as their own flock. What we use our dual purpose for, because we do let them free range, but we try to keep them out in our cattle fields. They eat a lot less that way because they're free ranging, but they come through behind the cattle and they break up the cow patties. They get a lot of their food from that and nutrition from that, and they just in general eat a lot less grain. They're very active, and they do help kind of manage our fields too. Having them on a trailer chicken coop, we can move them along the exterior of the fence, and then they go in and kind of break that stuff up. We can also run them on our other fields out here. And I think that really has like a lot of purposes and a lot of benefits to doing it that way. If you have any experience with the enhanced Delawares from McMurray, I'd be really interested in that. So they have one that is said to grow more meat. I don't know, it's not a true heritage breed, and I'm not sure how they get it to put on more meat. It's not real clear online, but I'm curious about that, and I'm curious if it does grow out the same after breeding, or if it's kind of like the hybrids where you get what you get, and it's hard to predict. So right now my plan is to go with regular Delawares, not the enhanced, and see how those do this year. So this is a multi-year project. Again, kind of starting from scratch, and maybe we switch to a different breed later on and kind of experiment with that. We're still pretty early into this whole process of trying to figure out what we prefer and what we like and what grows best in our area. And I'm excited to try this once again and hopefully get a little bit more consistent result coming out the other side. With that, the dual purpose, it offers a way to make a little bit more money too, because you're selling some of the layers. You're able to hatch them in-house and sell chicks in the spring. You can sell layers in the fall and make a little bit of profit on that. And then that's primarily what we feed our family. It does not put on the breast meat like a Cornish cross does, but we still like them as roasters. We haven't had any issue with eating roosters or having them be tough or anything like that if you're butchering them around that 20-week mark. And so it's a really great option that is not a Cornish cross. With the Cornish cross, you can't breed them yourself. Number one, they probably aren't going to make it to breeding age. They just get too big and unhealthy. And number two, you don't get a consistent product out of that either. Not sure what exactly they're breeding together to get that jumbo trait. They might even do like artificial insemination. I'm not sure, but it's not something that naturally happens within your own flock if you're raising those Cornish cross. So if you're looking for a more sustainable option, I suggest you watch our dual purpose videos and stay tuned for that little experiment that we have coming up, see what we learn and how it's different than our first experience. We're really excited to kind of dive into that coming in to 2025. If you're looking to get into meat birds and start making a profit right away, my biggest advice is to try to learn how to butcher yourself. especially if you're not doing huge batches, or find somebody that does it at a really good rate. Depending on where you live, there might be rules as far as like inspections and things, which is kind of what we're dealing with. We have a very limited number of butchers that we can go to because of the inspection requirements for us to sell those chickens. So in Wisconsin, we can sell directly from our farm. We can butcher and sell from our farm, but if we're taking them to another butcher and then selling that product, we do need to have them be inspected. So we have less options in order to be able to sell to people. It just depends on the rules and regulations in your area. But butchering is a huge cost when it comes to those chickens. And if you can do it yourself, that's where you're going to save the most money. Shop around at feed stores. We used to get our feed from Tractor Supply by the bag. We now go through a roller mill, a feed mill, and we can get our feed costs much, much lower than what we could buying them by the bag from someplace like Tractor Supply. Now, depending on where you are, you might have limited resources. That was the case before we switched to a feed mill. We did not have any other options or very limited options, and so the easiest for us was to order it from Tractor Supply or a local feed store, and it just tends to run quite a bit more there. So if you can buy in bulk and from a local feed mill, you can usually get a better rate and get your costs down there as well. Thank you so much for joining me today. I would love to hear from you. What is your favorite dual purpose bird? What is your best advice for growing Cornish cross chickens? Leave a comment. We read all of the comments and we love to hear from you guys. And we love to learn from your experiences as well. Even though we've been doing this for 10 years, we always hear new things that were helpful for people. And I know a lot of people watch our videos and read the comments and learn from you guys. So we appreciate every single one of you that leaves some advice, and I hope that you will. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. It is a huge blessing for our family, and we appreciate you. We also have all of our affiliate links linked down below in the description if you are shopping at Tractor Supply or Amazon, Azure. We would love if you used our links. It is truly a blessing that we get to do this and share with you. All of those affiliate links bring us a little bit of income or a little bit of a discount with those companies that helps us keep doing what we're doing, and we appreciate you so much. So thank you for hanging out with me today. I will catch you on the next one. Bye, guys.